Good morning and welcome to Bolton. My name is Josh Kelly. I am the town's new town administrator. We have live shows on the first and third Tuesdays of each month from 10:30 to 11 a.m. and we rebroadcast those shows on the second and fourth Tuesdays at the same time respectively. This is a continuing effort to promote open communications within our town. And if you have any ideas for future shows, please call or email me at Town Hall. I have a very special guest joining me today, and that is Catherine Marks from the U.S. Census Bureau, who's here to tell you a little bit more information about everything you need to know as the 2020 census approaches. So thank you very much for joining me, Catherine. It's great to have you. Excellent. I'm wondering if we can kick things off with just a little bit of a history of the U.S. Census Bureau. It's been around for a long time, and it's done quite a bit and it shapes our country quite a bit.
It does.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, and thanks for having me, and welcome to Bolton. So the U.S. Census Bureau is actually the largest statistical agency in the United States, and it actually produces over 130 surveys and programs. And we're here to talk about the decennial census, which happens every 10 years, and we've been actually doing it since 1790. The first director of the U.S. Census was our founding father, Thomas Jefferson, and he was counting 3.3 million people. And this year, it's estimated that we will count 330 million people in over 140 million household units. So it's the largest peacetime mobilization effort to happen on U.S. soil. And we're thrilled to be here talking with you about it because it's a national event, yet we know that the only way to have an accurate count is to go at the grassroots level. And just terrific to be able to speak with you about it.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous undertaking, obviously. I know we were just speaking before, you're talking about having 3 to 4 engagements every single day, just you and yourself. But could you tell us a little bit about your official role, your capacity, and how you've been engaging with the census so far?
Sure. So I'm with the New York Regional Census Center, and I'm a partnership specialist. And what we're doing is we are in the phase of educating and motivating people about the census. Because again, while the census happens every 10 years, we have to go and remind people. And we've learned in the past 2 decennial censuses that the grassroots effort, finding trusted voices, is really important to get an accurate count. So I'm a partnership specialist. There's a number of us in Connecticut, and we're working with governments, with faith-based leaders, with schools, with businesses, all to create a partnership to promote the census in their constituencies.
Excellent. So there's been a lot of buzz about the 2020 census in particular already. How is this census going to be different from the 2010 census and everything from before that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of exciting changes that you and I have talked about, and
that's right.
Great to share them with everybody else. We will be having the most technologically advanced census ever in 2020, and people will have 4 opportunities to respond. For the first time ever, people will be able to respond online. And that's something very new and exciting. In addition, they will also be respond on the phone and the traditional paper copy. And if they don't respond in any of those manners, they'll get the traditional knock at the door by a census enumerator. And if I can just tell a little bit more about that, for the online and the phone, filling out the questionnaire, you'll be able to do it in English as well as 12 non-English languages. So that's just a tremendous opportunity, again, because we want to get an accurate count. We have a goal this year, and our goal is to make sure that we count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. And by having those 4 ways to respond, we really hope that people do participate in the decennial census.
Absolutely. So what are some of the key dates that residents need to keep in mind as 2020 approaches?
Great. So as we just talked about, and hopefully we'll put up an infographic here, that there's going to be a number of ways to respond. Starting in March, almost every housing unit will get an invitation to respond. If we could get the graphic up about the how to respond, everybody will get an opportunity to respond. You'll get a postcard in the mail with an invitation to respond, and you can then therefore go online and respond online or by phone. And additionally, after that, this next graphic should show some of the dates. You'll get a number of reminders. We know that people are very busy, so you'll get a number of reminders, again, to respond, and that would be in March and April. And then if you don't respond at that point, what we call if you don't self-respond, that's when then the enumerators will come to your door.
Okay.
So even though it seems like March is far away, it's not. And this really, the 2020 census is here and now.
Absolutely. So why is it important to get a complete count?
Great question. So we use the census data for so many things in our country. First and foremost, the decennial census is mandated in our United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, for the purpose of apportionment the House of Representatives. So how many seats each state gets in the House of Representatives is based on census data. Number two, the state legislative districts and congressional districts are also determined based on census data. So, what towns are considered in what district. So getting that population count is really important. And then the third reason is the United States government sends a lot of money from the federal government to the states, billions of dollars every year. And that flow of money is all based on census data. So the census data shapes our communities, both in terms of representation, in terms of funding. And then last and not least is that any community group, Bolton, if you're trying to, build something, you look at the census data. So to have an accurate count really does shape our community.
Absolutely, and you can be sure that Bolton ends up seeing some of the money that we're talking about here that ends up trickling down from the federal government. Now, one of the questions that I personally have had in the past, and I know that you've had the chance to answer me already, is what constitutes where someone should be counted and when someone should be counted. I know that for me personally, as I transition still from another community to Bolton, I am still between two different residencies. I know that there are children who will be born during 2020, and there are a lot of questions about really who counts and when do they count. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so again, this is a population count, so everyone does count. And what you want to say is you want to be counted in the place where you live and reside most of the time.
Okay.
So whenever you do choose to move, sort of where you're going to be spending most of the time. So I would think that would be in your new Bolton home or surrounding home in 2020. But a really great question is where are college kids counted? Where are young adults who are in college, where are they counted? And if they are residing at the college campus, they actually are counted in that community. So if someone is going to UConn stores and lives at stores, that young adult will be counted in the population count of stores. So that's a great question. We also use Census Day. Census Day is April 1st. And people say, what is Census Day? Well, Census Day is if a child spends 50% of the time with both families, if he has a blended family, he or she, where that child lays his or her head to rest on April 1st is where that child is counted, because you brought up young children. And it's so important to make sure that when we are filling out the questionnaire in our housing units, that we make sure to count everyone that is residing in the household, including the young children.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So it's important to get a complete count on kind of the grand state level, and we've talked a little bit about how that might impact towns. But what can towns like Bolton, like Andover, so many of our small communities out here, what can we do to encourage a complete count?
Yeah. So we're just so thankful. As you know, Bolton has formed a complete count committee, and that's the formal term for when a group, and it could be, again, it could be a government group, it could be a business, it could be faith-based, any type of group that wants to work together to partnership up with us to make sure we have a complete count. And you've done that in Bolton, and in fact, you've created a resolution, and we're very thankful for that. And I'd like to also announce that we are having an event in Bolton next week, and maybe they can put up the flyer. Bolton is part of a nationwide recruiting effort, and we will be at the library next Thursday with recruiters to sign people up to be census takers, because it takes a lot of work, again, to make sure that we get a complete count. So if anyone who lives in this area would like to, come see a recruiter, again, we're going to be at the Bolton Library next Thursday. So that's one thing that the towns can do. Help us, give us a way to reach out to people. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is that through your levels of communication, through your communication with the schools, getting information out to the parents, how important it is to count young children, and that young children need to be on the census. You also can talk about the safety and the privacy of the information. Mm-hmm. The census data is safe. It is, there is a federal code that protects the safety of the information, and we need to make sure to get that out. Again, there's going to be a very earnest and very large media campaign, both social mm-hmm. media and traditional media, starting in January. But we know that there's trusted voices. And again, I'll bring up the libraries. I know that the library is part of your Complete Count Committee.
That's right.
Libraries have become such a forward-facing part of our communities. And as we move in our technology for filling out the census in 2020, we know that there's a technological divide and that some people might not have access to computers. And libraries and librarians are really going to be a major force in helping people know that these resources are here to come into the library and fill out the census. So all those small steps for a town like Bolton, for a town like Hartford, for a town like West Hartford, we're building all of those relationships and building them, at the grassroots level, so that people understand. What I like to say is they understand that the census is safe, the census is easy, and the census is important. Again, it's safe, that your privacy, your data cannot be used against you. It's important. We talked about the fact that it's about representation in Congress. It's about federal funding coming to your communities. And it's easy. The census is only expected to take people about 10 minutes to 10 minutes to fill out, depending on how complicated your household is, right. Housing unit is. So again, it's safe, easy, and important. And that means that we want to count everyone in Bolton, and we want to count everyone in Hartford, and we want to count everyone in West Hartford. So depending on the size of your town, doesn't mean that you still don't have your work cut out for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very true. And I can speak to Bolton's Complete Count Committee. As you said, we have our library on board. I personally am part of that. Our superintendent of schools, Kristen Hecht, has agreed to serve as part of the Complete Count Committee. And we'll also have our senior services director, Carrie Concatelli, who has agreed to be a part of this. We're hoping to also engage our registrars of voters. These are all places where the members of the public, such as yourself, are able to come in and really connect with the outlets that we have with individuals such as yourself with the Bureau, and we can try and help get you answers to questions that you have and make sure that you have all the information you need to make sure that you are answering the survey and that you're answering it fully and completely. So thank you for that. Now we have a few ideas, as you've mentioned, of outreach that we're going to be doing through the school system. Are there actions that you've seen done or that that other Complete Count committees have come up with that you would like to see enacted in Bolton that can kind of go above and beyond just sending home more material? What are the other ways that you've seen Complete Count committees engage residents? Yeah,
so I am working with Complete Count committees throughout the region, mm-hmm. and they run in size from 3 mm-hmm. people to, in West Hartford, I think we have 60 some odd people in a Complete Count committee.
Wow.
So it's all very specific to the communities. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to see in Bolton is that conversation happen, so that when people are filling it out, they actually have gotten enough information to know that what they're doing is really exciting, that they're part of history, that mm-hmm. they're part of Bolton, that they're shaping their community. So what I would really like is that when we are seeing people fill out their questionnaires in March, and we're seeing a great response rate from Bolton, that it's because of the work of the Complete Count Committee that they understand the importance of it, and they get excited about it. It really is truly exciting to think about the history of the census and the positive ways that it can shape our communities and how important the data is.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned, of course, we are very different than Hartford, West Hartford, even Manchester right next door, some of our surrounding communities. What are the challenges? What are the areas or what are the difficulties that we really face as a small community in terms of our outreach and making sure that we get that complete count?
Yeah. So every census has its challenges, and every community has its challenges. So one thing is we need to make sure that when an enumerator comes to the door, that someone knows that that is indeed a census employee,
right,
that they are a census worker. And you and I communicated that just last month when we were doing some of our address canvassing. So that's something really important that will happen out here in rural communities. In the environment that we're in, we need to make sure that people understand that when a census worker is coming to their door, how to identify them. And working with the senior community, I think, is so important because sometimes, they get nervous about that. So that's really important. And living in a rural community, again, that technological divide, letting people know that they can go to the library to fill out the census, but they also can fill it out the old-fashioned way by paper if they want. Or what's really important, if someone doesn't feel comfortable with technology or for some other reason, if they feel like the most beneficial way for them to do the census is on the phone, that there'll be a phone number and they'll be able to talk to a real person.
Yep. And
I think that for the seniors, that might help as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely, and it's great that we have so many different avenues for people to, and I'm hoping that it will really help different generations, people just find their comfort zone and be able to engage in that way.
Right.
It's really excellent.
And just the Bolton Complete Count Committee trying to get that message out, right? That going on, that this first year you can go online and fill it out, or you can go on the phone to fill it out. Just
Absolutely.
getting that message out is just, could be wonderful
Half
for this
the battle,
community.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before that, of course, folks have concerns about giving this much personal information away. And you've mentioned that none of the information that is given certainly can be used against anybody. But is there anything else that you can share with our audience today about what's done to really protect that level of information?
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'll just want to read from a brochure so I can
Of course, make sure you hit all the points.
Exactly. Yep. So the brochure I'm referring to is the 2020 Census and the Confidentiality. And this is to be clear that the law is clear and that no information can be shared. Title 13 of the U.S. Code, the Census Bureau cannot release any identifiable information about individuals, households, or businesses, even to law enforcement agencies. And that's really what people need to know. The law states that the information collected can only be used for statistical purposes and no other purposes. The Census Bureau staff, including myself, take this oath to protect everyone's information very seriously. And indeed, we take an oath. There is a penalty of up to 5 years in prison or $250 in fines. So it's something that we take very, very seriously, that the answers to the census cannot be used against anyone by any federal agency or court. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And we only use it for statistical purposes only. So, again, it just brought up to, who's living in Bolton.
Yep.
And the information about those people. It's not a person-by-person information data.
Absolutely. And it's very striking to me how gravely almost the U.S. Census Bureau takes this oath. And I certainly appreciate it. I always have felt like my information is being taken seriously whenever I've interacted with the U.S. Census Bureau, answered questionnaires, and I hope that you will too. But I'm sure that there is a lot more information that you may have about just the census in general this coming year. Are there any other key pieces of information that you want to make sure leave our viewers with before you head out today?
Yeah. Again, thank you for having me on, and it's just great to be able to work with Bolton and the surrounding communities. We've heard a lot about the Census Bureau And again, remember that the 2020 census is right around the corner. Everyone will be getting invitations to respond in March with reminders in April. That the census, our goal this year for this 2020 census is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. That their census data is only used for statistical purposes only. We're making a big outreach with language and make sure that we count our children in the households, make sure that we include them on the 2020 census questionnaire.
You've mentioned languages a couple times. Sorry to stop you in your tracks. But could you elaborate a little bit more? What are some of those languages that are covered?
So a lot of information will be bilingual. So there's going to be a lot in Spanish. But in addition to Spanish and English, there's another 11 languages that will be accessible. And actually, we're taking it one step further. We actually have guides in 59 non-English languages.
Wow.
So those include Urdu and Farsi and Nepali. So we're going to have guides in those English languages because for communities, very, very large communities, we do have to make sure that people who weren't born in the United States understand the census, understand that it's safe, easy, and important. And we want them to respond. We want to get that accurate count. So in the 12 non-English languages for both telephone enumeration and online enumeration, some of those other ones are Portuguese, French, so Russian, Polish. In fact, I have a colleague of mine in New York who's bilingual, and she actually does partnership presentations to the Polish community in the Polish language to make sure that they're understanding it, because we're creating partnerships at every level with every types of community to get an accurate count. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for expanding on that. It's great to have you in today. It's obviously, it sounds like every base has really been covered by the Census Bureau. There's really no excuse to not make sure that you have that information, that you're responding hopefully as soon as possible, not waiting to get that knock at your door, but of course having that backup there. Yeah. So if you, the viewer, have any questions about the U.S. Census Bureau, about what we, the town, are doing to connect with Catherine, her department, and the Census Bureau in general, please feel free to get in touch. We will give you the contact information that you need to get answers directly if need be. We can also do our best to answer any questions that you have just as soon as you walk in the door or pick up the phone and give us a call. So any other points that you want to touch on?
Yeah, can I just make one more point?
Yes,
so
please.
We talked about jobs, and again, we're going to be at the Bolton Library next Thursday. But you can also go online and apply for jobs. We're going to be really hiring a lot of people. It takes a lot of effort. So we hope that you either come to us and visit us in Bolton at the library next Thursday, or you can apply online from the comfort of your own home and join the force, join the group, again, to have an enumeration. The jobs pay over $20 an hour. They're flexible and part-time, and we need all the work we can do, and the local communities, we really like to get them involved.
Absolutely, and from what I've had the chance to talk to you about in the past, it sounds like having folks in the community who are the ones going out and knocking on doors, and having that at least somewhat recognizable face makes all the difference. Yeah. So I really appreciate you bringing that back up. I hope that you will all come out to the library so that you'll have the chance to come speak with members of the Census Bureau.
Excellent.
So, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Just a few more things that I want to touch on before we wrap up today. First and foremost, this coming week, we have a Board of Finance meeting at or just starting after 7 p.m. That's this Thursday, October 17th. Next week, we have an Inland Wetlands Commission meeting on Tuesday, October 22nd, and I actually won't be back on to film another one of these shows until November. So on the last week of October, you will see a Fire Commission meeting, an Economic Development Commission meeting, and the Water Pollution Control Authority. And again, that's all the week of October 28th. The next regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be on Tuesday, November 12th. That has been pushed back a week from its normal first Tuesday of the month, as we have an election coming up. Those are our municipal elections, and the election is on Tuesday, November 5th. Please No matter who you're voting for, no matter what you stand for, please come out to vote. In the last municipal election, only 43% of Bolton residents who are registered to vote came out to cast their ballot. This year, I want to see that number well above 50%. I'm hoping that we can approach as close to 100% as possible, make some history, and make sure that your voice is heard in our community. It's something that is very important to me as someone who's in professional town administration. I want to make sure that your voice is heard when we have elections and when certainly my bosses, the Board of Selectmen, will be chosen. And I want to make sure that you are as active and engaged and making the difference that you want to see in your community. And you have the chance to do that at the ballot on Election Day. Our next show will be on Tuesday, November 5th as well, so I'll be joining you on Election Day. Please don't let that show keep you from the polls. It will also be available online after. And we will have guests from Sustainable CT over at Eastern Connecticut State University, and that will be Abraham Hilding-Solorio and Jess LeClaire. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you again to Catherine for coming all this way from New York to join us. And thank you once again to the Community Voice channel for your ongoing support. Thanks and have a great day.